Kanye West is one of the most legendary rappers of all time. His iconic music and larger-than-life persona have captivated the world for over 2 decades. But at the core of all of his success, there is one thing that makes Kanye, his insane production. So today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into all the production techniques that Kanye uses on his most legendary beats. And we're going to make our own beat inspired by 3 key Kanye albums. The beat continues to get better and crazier as the video goes on, so definitely stay tuned. We've got a ton to unpack. There are so many gems and stuff that you can apply to your own music. So sit back and get ready to go inside the world of Kanye West's insane production. College Dropout was centered around Kanye's iconic chipmunk soul sound, where he would take old records like this, chop them up, and pitch them up so that the vocals sounded almost like Alvin and the Chipmunks were singing it. And he sampled some legendary soul singers like Marvin Gaye on Spaceships,
I swear I do.
Aretha Franklin on School Spirit,
AKA Step, Delta Step, SG Rose,
and Chaka Khan on Through the Wire.
I spit it through the wire, man.
Pitched up soul samples were changing the game. Kanye was pioneering a new sound. That being said, instead of actually sampling an old record for today's video, I thought it'd be more interesting to make our own soul sample 100% from scratch. Bear with me while I make the sample from scratch because I'll show you how to flip it like Kanye in a second, but let's get into it. All right, to start out, almost all these vintage soul records had acoustic live drums. So I went into my Vintage Essentials kit and grabbed a live drum break. From there, I wanted to add some chords, and a lot of Kanye's older music had this inspiring, soulful, uplifting kind of energy, and I wanted to replicate that with the chords. So first, I started with my acoustic upright piano, playing some chords on there, and then I began to layer in other instruments following the same chord progression I composed on the piano to kind of fill it out and bring a little bit more soul and instrumentation to it. All these vintage soul records also had a live electric bass, so I went into the Scarby Rickenbacker VST and laid down this groovy bass pattern following the chord progression. And now that we got our chords, bass, and drums, the foundation is pretty much set on this one. But to make it a little bit more catchy and ear-grabbing, I came up with a simple top-line melody on my glockenspiel. Now, I really liked this top line melody, and I especially liked the little motif that, that little. So I wanted to build on that motif to make it really pop in the mix. So I loosely played the same melody on guitar, strings, and brass to really just fill it out and emphasize that core melodic idea. Now, this is cool, but the most important part to these soulful samples that Kanye uses on the College Dropout are the vocals. It wouldn't be Kanye Chipmunk Soul without those soulful vocal chops. So I went into my Vintage Essentials kit and grabbed some vocal loops that sound like this. After I added those, I ran the whole entire sample through my 1978 reel-to-reel tape machine to really finish it off with that gritty, old-school sampled feeling. So, now that we've got the sample done and sounding authentic, we gotta chop it up and flip it College Dropout style. So I loaded the melody up into my sampler and I pitched it up 6 semitones to really get that chipmunk, high-pitched, soul-singing kind of effect. And for the intro of the beat, I just let the sample play out as it's normally arranged, like this. But Kanye is known for chopping and flipping his samples. So for the main section that the drums are going to come in on, I wanted to add some more chops to make it feel more like Kanye. And to do this, I used a sampling technique that you can hear across a ton of Kanye's work. You want to have a repetitive sample chop play multiple times over and over, and then on the last time before the pattern repeats, the sample chop changes up. And one song where you can hear this technique is Spaceships. Doing this creates a nice repetitive loop that's easier for Kanye to flow on and get some bars off, but that little switch up at the end is enough to make it not feel too repetitive and redundant, and it also helps transition into the next section of the song. So I did the same thing with our sample and put down these basic chops. And as you can tell, it plays 3 times in a row with a super repetitive chop, and then on the last time around, it kind of switches up. By the way, this is a great go-to sampling technique if you're just getting started with sampling. Now that we got the chops done, it's time to add some drums. And the drums on College Dropout had a much more live and acoustic kind of feeling when you compare it to today's drums. Kanye got this sound by sampling old live drum breaks from Soul Records, and then chopping up the individual drum sounds in the drum breaks into one-shots that he could later program in on his MPC. And the combination of these live sampled drum sounds with him actually playing them in on the drum pads of the MPC gave the drums on this album a really human, groovy kind of bounce. So for the drums today, we're gonna make sure that nothing is 100% on the grid and the velocities are changing to give it a more human kind of feeling. And to get the groove started, I started with the hi-hats. And if you listen to All Falls Down, you can hear that the hi-hats kind of play slow at first, and then at the end of every pattern, they speed up, and I really love that effect. Doing this breaks up the repetitiveness of the hats, kind of like how we did with the sample chop. So I did the same technique and I played it in live on my MIDI keyboard so it has a more human effect, and that sounds like this. And once I had that, I wanted to enhance that human, raw kind of groove a little bit more. And after listening to 2 words, I could tell that there was a live hi-hat break tucked behind the drums a little bit, and it sounded great. So I found a live hi-hat loop and a basic snare and put them with the other hi-hats, and we get this. Once I had that, I wanted to add a kick to help lock in the bounce. So I put down this super simple 2-bar pattern with this nice little ghost bounce kick that hits at a super low velocity, and it adds a ton of that old school hip hop feeling. Take a listen. Now that we got the main kick down, I wanted to add something that Kanye uses all the time in the College Dropout beats: kick rolls.
Kenny Hop.
I really love the kick roll on Through the Wire and how it kind of crescendos up, getting louder and louder right before the beat drops, so that when the beat finally drops, it has that impact. So I did the same exact thing here and actually copied the same rhythm that our hi-hats are doing at the fast part at the end, and added on this kick roll at the end of every pattern. Finally, on Through the Wire, you can hear that Ye doesn't use a super hard, gritty 808. Instead, he uses an electric bass that really gives this more soft, live, acoustic kind of feeling to the beat. So I built a little live bass line following what the sample was doing, and then I duplicated that MIDI onto a sine wave that I put in a super low octave to kind of act as a sub, because I felt like the live bass was lacking some of that low end to kind of fill out the beat, but it had that high end live bass texture that I wanted. So combining both of them together, I was able to get that sub and low end of an 808 with the texture of a live bass. And for one last little touch, I added this drum fill right before the beat drop just to add a little bit more anticipation. And this is what that sounds like. After College Dropout's release, Ye was catapulted into the spotlight as an artist. The album debuted at #2 on the Billboard 200 charts, and now that Kanye had gotten his chance, he was not going to let it slip up by being just another one of these rappers that comes and goes. He wanted to up the ante, and he definitely did on his next project, Late Registration, where he built on top of that College Dropout kind of sound by bringing in more instrumentation and orchestration, actually working in Abbey Road studio with a live orchestra to really bring this album to life and level up his production. Late Registration had huge iconic songs like Gold Digger, Touch the Sky, and Diamonds from Sierra Leone. And after proving himself once again with another huge successful album, Kanye was able to go on a stadium tour with legendary rock band U2. As you can probably imagine, after touring with rock stars like the Rolling Stones and U2, and seeing the impact that their music had with these huge stadium crowds full of people, Kanye was inspired to say the least. He wanted his music to hit in the stadiums just like theirs. He wanted to make anthems. And this is what birthed Kanye's most commercially successful album, selling 957,000 copies first week, Graduation. This album built on Kanye's sound in a way that hip-hop had never seen before. With hits like Stronger, Can't Tell Me Nothing, Flashing Lights, and so many more, Kanye really graduated and solidified his place as one of the top dogs in the industry. With that being said, let's see how we can take our simple college dropout type beat and elevate it to something anthemic and crazy like Graduation. But before that, if you love Kanye's sampled beats, I have a game changer for you. I just dropped Vintage Essentials, which is an insane bundle that helps you make your own soul samples 100% from scratch. So you don't need to worry about copyright claims or legal trouble. It's got live instrument phrases, vocals, one-shots, drum breaks, and a ton of other stuff I made with Grammy-nominated soul vocalists and session musicians. And it's also got a crazy loop kit with over 120 loops. So real quick, if you'll humor me, let me just play you a couple of these samples. It's going to be the first link in the description down below on this video. And for the next week or so, it's going to be on a discounted price. So go check it out. I promise you won't regret it. But anyways, back into the video. Graduation pushed hip hop to new heights sonically. Kanye wanted to elevate his sound to hit in the stadium and really resonate with a huge crowd of people. On this album, Kanye doesn't just loop samples, add drums, and leave it like that. He gets more creative with the sampling and actually builds out a whole world around the sample, combining that sampled sound that Kanye is known and loved for with bright, lush synthesizers that really cut through and add that anthemic stadium sound, just like the synths on Flashing Lights and Stronger.
She don't break this, 'cause right now that has forsaken this.
To get that bright synthy kind of sound, the best sound that you can use is a saw wave. Saw waves have a super bright, in-your-face kind of sound, which is exactly what we want for this Graduation vibe. So I grabbed a saw-sounding synth from the Alchemy VST and Logic and put down these super simple but effective chords following the melody that we made earlier. Now, if you remember just a second ago, I talked about how Kanye really built a whole world around his sample. He wasn't just looping the same 8-bar sample chop for the whole beat, and he kind of let the samples take a little bit more of a back seat on some of this album. A great example of this is on Can't Tell Me Nothing, where he has a soulful vocal chop playing sparsely with some synthesizers to kind of build the foundation of the beat.
I had a dream I could buy my way to heaven.
As you can tell, the vocal's adding a ton of character and feeling to the beat, but the synth is really building out that Graduation sound and kind of the foundation for the beat. So I wanted to bring back that sample from our College Dropout beat, but in order to do that, I had to redo the chops to kind of fit in with the synth that we had just added. And I did that by adding a bit more space with these chops, almost kind of doing a call and response with the synth chords that we just did. Take a listen. You can see that right when the synth comes in, the vocal isn't playing to give the synth room to have that impact. And then the vocal plays and the synth pauses right at the last vocal chop to give the vocal space to breathe right there. So I'm intentionally creating space right here to make each sound shine. Now, from here, we got to add some more synths to really fill this out. And if you listen to Good Life with T-Pain, you can hear a bright synth bass that really just adds to that synthy kind of feeling. So I grabbed a bass preset from a VST emulating a Moog synthesizer, which is a synth that Kanye is known for using, and I put down a simple pattern layered in with that sine wave as a sub bass, just like we did earlier on in the College Dropout section. And for me, another standout part of that Good Life beat is the over-the-top bright synth lead. These bright synths are heard all over early 2010s records, so it's safe to say that Kanye had an impact on the game. So I wanted to add a similar synth lead using the Juno synth, and I got this catchy little melody. Now we got all the melodic elements out of the way for the graduation section. So it's time to get into another key part of Kanye's graduation sound, those anthemic stadium drums. One technique Kanye did all over this album to get that big anthemic kind of bounce is use a 4 to the floor kick. So I did the same thing with our kick to start off the drums. I don't know about you, that sounds cool, but it's not giving me that stadium kind of sound. The kicks are an essential part of this sound, because if you think about it, it's really the heartbeat of these records, so it's gotta be thumping. And Kanye figured this out after going through countless versions of the kicks for Stronger, until he finally got the right thumping kick from Timbaland. So to level up our kick and really give it that stadium music kind of sound, we're gonna layer 3 kicks together, which sounds kind of crazy, but hear me out. The kicks on this album had punch, rumble, and air all at the same time, almost kind of sounding like a kick sample was played through huge stadium speakers. And our kick now sounds nice and punchy, but it's kind of lacking that air and rumble that I'm craving. So I added this second kick with a nice high end to add some air. And then for the third kick, I added this super low impact rumble kind of sound to emulate a kick echoing throughout a stadium. Take a listen before and after adding in those extra kicks. It's a subtle change, but it really adds to that anthemic sound. And another thing I love about the drums on Stronger is that they evolve and switch up throughout the track. Listen to how it goes from that 4 on the floor pattern to a more typical hip hop kind of bounce.
That's how long I've been on ya.
So I did the same thing and played all 3 kicks in a different rhythm for a second section. But now that the kick isn't hitting every beat with that 4 to the floor kind of pattern, it's opened up an empty space for a snare. And one of the most unique and iconic snare samples that Kanye's used is the snare on Good Morning. So I grabbed that same exact snare sample and put it in our beat. And then for a third section, I brought back in the 4 on the floor kick with the Good Morning snare. I also added in one more distorted snare to kind of cut through the mix a little bit more. And finally, I took some inspiration from Homecoming, where you can kind of hear this almost tambourine kind of sound hitting with the kick. I thought that extra high end that the tambourine was adding sounded great, so I wanted to do something similar, and I actually ended up grabbing the same open hat that you can hear on Touch the Sky and layered it in with the kick to get our final graduation style drums. This is sounding pretty great, but we're not stopping here. So Graduation released and Kanye was on top of the world, but just 2 months after the release of the project, Kanye's mom, Donda, passed away, which as expected was super hard on him. And with those hard times, his sound changed. It turned away from that bright, inspiring sound that he had been known for and led to his game-changing album, 808s and Heartbreaks. This album brought a more emotional and dark side of Kanye. But soon after the release of this album, Kanye released a ton of backlash after what happened with Taylor Swift at the VMAs.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
After that night at the VMAs, the public opinion of Kanye fell off immediately. And it was so bad that Mos Def came to Kanye's house and told him to get out of the country. So Kanye put himself in a self-exile in Europe to get his career back on track outside of the public eye. Kanye needed to remind the world that no matter how you feel about him, he's Kanye West. He makes undeniably amazing music. Kanye needed a comeback album to win back the public, which is where one of his most legendary albums was born, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Everything we love about Kanye's production production is on this album. Soulful samples, raw, gritty drums, synthesizers. Also on Twisted Fantasy, there's a ton of orchestration and instrumentation. On some of his earlier projects, he went for a more minimalistic kind of sound, but on this album, he was pushing it to the max. He said, fuck minimalism, we're gonna do everything we can to make this the most amazing music ever. And he definitely did that and pushed rap to new heights that it had never reached before. This is the biggest and most grand a Kanye album has ever sounded. He had to prove himself to the world, and he delivered. This album cost $3 million to record, making it the most expensive hip-hop recording in history. They were on a mission to make the best rap album possible, no expenses spared. Mike Dean even said when working on this album that they knew that they were making the best rap album of all time.
When making that album, did you guys know that you guys were arguably making the best rap album ever?
Yeah. It's short and simple, yeah.
So, in spirit of that crazy, over-the-top maximalist sound that Twisted Fantasy has, I wanted to add another switch up on our beat to really build it out into something beautiful, luscious, that sounds like it's straight off of Twisted Fantasy. And to make sure that it transitions nicely from our graduation section to our Twisted Fantasy section, I felt like it needed some kind of interlude section. And I wanted to build it out with a piano and those luscious strings that you can hear all over Twisted Fantasy. When you listen to the interlude on All the Lights, you can hear that the piano and the strings are working together, loosely following the same melody. Doing this makes the melody sound super cohesive, and it helps give the track a more main melodic theme. So to emulate this in our beat, I followed the lead melody from the graduation synth that we had done earlier with my acoustic piano. Then to add on top of it to make it feel cinematic and big, I added in a string section doing the same melody. And you'll notice I didn't just use one violin VST. I actually played the same melody on 3 different string instruments, 2 basses, and 1 cello. And having 3 separate stems kind of emulates 3 different string players actually being in the studio and playing stuff, rather than just having it all on 1 MIDI. Another key sound to Twisted Fantasy was the distorted electric guitar. You can hear it all over tracks like Gorgeous and Power, but one of my favorite examples is the legendary Mike Dean guitar solo on Devil in a New Dress. So I wanted to channel my inner Mike Dean, and I grabbed my electric guitar and I followed the melody that the piano and strings were doing to get this. Then I wanted to enhance that distorted sound with the bass, just like the bass on Hell of a Life. So I took some inspiration from that and put down this pattern. From here, I wanted to progress the melody. One of my favorite parts about Twisted Fantasy is how the songs tell a story both lyrically but also musically. The production evolves throughout the whole song, and it's not just an 8-bar loop looped over and over. And one track that does a great job of evolving throughout is Runaway. I really loved how the rhythm of the piano was kind of driving this whole record. So I wanted to evolve the melody a little bit and add some more rhythm to the piano to make it a little bit more high energy and fast paced. So I went back to the piano and played the same melody just with more rhythm and got this. And then I also added in 2 more high octave violins playing the same string melody just to fill it out and add some more energy. Going off that Runaway theme, I wanted to add that iconic vocal guitar solo that Kanye did for a whopping 3 minutes on the outro of the song. And Although this might sound like a guitar, this is actually Kanye singing through heavy auto-tune and heavy distortion to kind of emulate a guitar's sound. And it almost kind of sounds like a guitar is trying to speak, but it's just lost in the distortion. So to get that same sound, I put on my singing hat and I got to work mumbling out some simple melodies. And trust me, the singing with no effects is not it, but it's crazy as the final product.
Don't let me go, go, don't let me go.
So obviously this needs a lot of work. The first thing I did is put a ton of auto-tune on my voice to make sure that it's staying on key and give it that more robotic kind of effect. And then I went into Logic's guitar amp presets and threw on this super distorted preset. And then you get this. Sounding pretty sick, but we're still missing an essential part to that Twisted Fantasy sound. Some raw, gritty live drums.
No one man should have all that power.
Middle East and climate, find it, 20 my Tyrande.
Top off, split and go where? Back to wearing knockoffs.
To get this sound, one technique that Kanye uses is to take a live drum break and then chop out each individual sound as its own drum one shot, so that you can build your own pattern with those live drums. So I grabbed a drum break from my vintage essential kit that sounds like this. And I like the sound of these drums, but I wanted the rhythm to be a little bit different, so I chopped it, resampled it, and got this. And this sounded great, but it lacked that movement and bounce that I wanted to finish off the drum. So I dragged in another hi-hat loop from Vintage Essentials and got this. Finally, to get these drums knocking to have that Twisted Fantasy sound, I needed to add some distortion. So I grabbed this free plugin called Saturation Knob. Take a listen to the before and after. And once I had this, I only needed a few more sounds to finish it off. And I wanted to add in some super gritty bass and guitar stabs like the ones on Power.
The system broken, the school's closed, the prison's open.
Those stabs really add to this mean, cocky kind of vibe that the song has, and that's exactly what I want to add to our beat. So I grabbed a distorted preset from the Scarby Rickenbacker bass, my electric guitar, and put down this pattern. And to finish it off, I really loved the distorted vocal chops that Kanye uses on Power and Runaway. So I yelled some random words into the mic, put a ton of distortion on them, and got this. So with that, the beat is finished. And I'll play the whole beat through in just a second, but if you learned anything from this video, hit that subscribe button so I can keep making more videos like this, and let's dive in. Kick roll's nasty. Get the graduation section. The synth is nasty. Here we go. Thanks for making it to the end of this one. And just as a reminder, if you want to make your own soul samples or you like making sampled beats, click the first link in the description to check out my Vintage Essentials kit. It's got over 5,000 vintage samples in it. It's not like anything I've ever seen, so go check it out.